The day I died, the whole country celebrated my cousin. She stood on a brightly lit stage, smiling as reporters called her the youngest technology genius in the nation. The invention she proudly held above her head was mine. 5 years earlier, I had designed every circuit, every line of code, every prototype. She promised we would become successful together. Instead, she slowly replaced my name with hers. When investors asked questions, she answered. When journalists arrived, she stood in front of the cameras. When contracts were signed, my signature disappeared. I became nothing more than an assistant. Then one morning, the company announced that confidential research had been leaked. Every piece of evidence pointed toward me. My security card, my computer, my fingerprints. Even the emails looked like I had sent them. I was arrested. No one believed my innocence. Not my colleagues, not my family, not even the man I had loved for 4 years. He stood beside my cousin and testified against me. I lost my career, my reputation, my future. 3 years later, I died alone in a tiny rented apartment, watching the awards ceremony, where my cousin accepted another international prize using my life's work. My last thought was simple. If I had one more chance, I wouldn't stop her from stealing. I'd let her steal everything, because this time, I would decide exactly what she stole. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my cold apartment. I was sitting in the university engineering laboratory. The smell of fresh solder, the sound of students laughing, the professor writing equations on the whiteboard. I knew this day. It was 5 years before everything was stolen. My hands trembled as I looked at my phone. April 18, the exact day my cousin first asked to borrow my prototype. I smiled. Not because I had forgiven her. Because this time, I knew every move she would make. The classroom door opened. There you are! My cousin Maya walked in carrying 2 coffees, wearing the same innocent smile that had fooled everyone in my first life. I saved you a seat. I accepted the coffee. In my previous life, I would have hugged her. Now, I simply watched. She casually glanced toward my workbench. There it was. Prototype Alpha. The device that would change everything. I heard you're almost finished, she said. Can I see it later? I smiled warmly. Of course. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. She thought she had already won. She didn't know. Prototype Alpha was never the real invention. That evening, I worked alone. Not on the device, on something invisible. A hidden verification system. Every version of my invention would secretly record the creator's identity, the exact time it was activated, every person who connected to it, every modification ever made. Impossible to delete, impossible to fake. Then I created another prototype. It looked identical, worked almost perfectly, but one critical function was intentionally incomplete. Anyone who stole it would proudly demonstrate a device destined to fail in front of investors. I leaned back in my chair. In my first life, I protected my invention. This life, I'm protecting the truth. Outside the laboratory, I noticed Maya watching through the window. She smiled. She believed she was about to steal my future. I smiled back. Because this time, I was the one setting the trap. 1 week later, the university announced its annual Innovation Expo. Every engineering team would present their inventions to professors, investors, and technology companies, exactly as I remembered. In my previous life, this was the day Maya secretly copied my prototype. This time, I placed the fake prototype on my workbench before leaving for lunch. I didn't lock the drawer. I wanted someone to open it. As I stepped into the hallway, I quietly activated a tiny hidden camera disguised as a USB charger. It recorded everything. 30 minutes later, I returned. The drawer looked untouched. But one tiny screw on the prototype had been turned half a rotation. I smiled. She had taken the bait. That evening, Maya invited me to dinner. I've been thinking, she said gently. We should enter the competition together. Just like before, only now I knew why. She wanted unlimited access to my research. I nodded. Of course. Her smile grew wider. She believed I still trusted her. The next morning, Maya arrived carrying our presentation slides. As the projector turned on, my heart remained calm. Every design, every diagram, every animation had been copied from the fake prototype, exactly as I planned. The judges applauded. Investors exchanged impressed glances. Maya stood confidently at the center of the stage, accepting every compliment. Then one professor raised his hand. Can you explain why the energy stabilizer loses efficiency after 8 hours? For a split second, Maya froze. She had memorized the slides. But she had never understood the invention. She forced a smile. It only needs a small software update. The professor slowly nodded. I see. I stayed silent. There was no need to expose her yet. The real trap hadn't even begun. That night, I opened my laptop. The hidden verification system flashed on the screen. New device detected. User Maya. Location, Student Innovation Center. Files copied, 147. Time, 8:43 p.m. Every action, every file, every modification. Automatically recorded. Automatically backed up. She believed she had erased every trace. Instead, she had created the strongest evidence against herself. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. And this time, I would make sure the whole world watched. 3 months passed. The Innovation Expo changed everything. Maya's fake prototype won first place. Newspapers called her the young genius who will change the future. Television stations lined up for interviews. Technology companies competed to invest in her project. Exactly, as they had in my first life. Meanwhile, I disappeared. At least that's what everyone believed. While Maya enjoyed interviews and magazine covers, I rented a tiny workshop on the edge of the city. No cameras, no applause, just silence. This time I wasn't improving the fake prototype. I was building the real invention. Version Omega. Smaller, faster, twice as powerful, and protected by an encryption system no one could copy. Every circuit was unique. Every component carried a microscopic identification mark. Anyone trying to duplicate it would leave undeniable evidence behind. One evening, someone knocked on my workshop door. Professor Daniel, the same professor who had questioned Maya during the Innovation Expo. I've been looking for you. He placed Maya's presentation on my workbench. I've studied her design. He looked directly into my eyes. This isn't her work. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I smiled. What makes you think that? Professor Daniel pointed at the blueprints. Only the original engineer would hide mathematical patterns like these. Then he pulled another folder from his bag. I've spent 3 months investigating. Inside were dozens of documents, patent applications, engineering notes, security logs. Everything pointed toward Maya. But there still wasn't enough proof to expose her publicly. Not yet. Across the city, Maya signed a multi-million-dollar investment contract. She raised a glass of champagne. Finally, I've beaten her forever. She laughed. She had no idea that every interview, every contract, every public demonstration brought the day of her downfall closer. Late that night, I switched on version Omega. A soft blue light filled the workshop. The device worked perfectly. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I finally had something no one could steal. I looked at the city skyline through the window. The stage is yours, Maya. Enjoy the applause while it lasts. Because when the truth comes, the world wouldn't remember the woman who accepted the awards. They would remember the woman who built the future. 6 months later, the National Future Technology Summit opened in the capital. Every major technology company was there. Government officials, international investors, news networks from around the world. And standing at the center of it all, Maya. She was the keynote speaker. The future belongs to innovation, she said confidently as cameras flashed. The audience erupted in applause. Watching from backstage, I quietly smiled. This was the moment she had dreamed of. It would also become the moment she would never forget. That morning, Professor Daniel handed me an invitation. You don't have to stay hidden anymore. For the first time since my rebirth, my name appeared on an official guest badge. Not as Maya's assistant, not as a volunteer, simply Ava Carter, systems engineer. I looked at the badge for several seconds. In my previous life, no one had ever acknowledged my work. Today was different. As Maya stepped onto the main stage, she unveiled what she called Project Phoenix X. The audience gasped. The design looked almost identical to my real invention. She had continued stealing my research piece by piece, believing she had finally perfected it. Investors stood to applaud. One executive announced, "Our company is prepared to invest $50 million today." Maya smiled brightly. She believed she had finally reached the top. Backstage, my laptop vibrated. Hidden verification system. Unauthorized device detected. Live demonstration connected. Original security signature found. The tracking system had activated automatically. Every component inside. Maya's device began transmitting its encrypted identification code. The evidence was no longer stored only on my computer. It was being recorded on secure cloud servers and mirrored to Professor Daniel's legal archive. Even if someone destroyed my laptop, the truth would survive. Professor Daniel looked at me. Everything is ready. I took a slow breath. Not yet. Let her finish. On stage, Maya proudly activated the device. The machine hummed to life. Blue lights illuminated the hall. The audience applauded. Then, a small warning light appeared. Maya frowned. She pressed another button. The warning disappeared. She laughed nervously. Just a normal calibration. No one noticed. Except me. The hidden verification system had already started exposing the copied hardware. The countdown had begun. Maya continued smiling, unaware that every passing second generated more evidence against her. I stood in the shadows, calm and patient. In my first life, I whispered, I begged people to believe me. This life, I won't ask anyone. I'll let the truth speak for itself. The conference hall fell silent. Maya smiled confidently as Project Phoenix X continued its live demonstration. Then, every screen in the auditorium suddenly went black. Gasps echoed through the audience. A second later, a single message appeared. System verification in progress. Maya frowned. What's happening? She pressed every button she could find. Nothing responded. Then the giant screen changed again. Original creator verified. Ava Carter. The entire hall froze. Professor Daniel slowly walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he said calmly, every component inside this device carries an encrypted engineering signature. He held up a small circuit board. This signature cannot be copied or erased. The audience watched in complete silence. The system has now verified the original creator. Another screen appeared. A timeline. Every modification, every copied file, every login, every transfer from Maya's computer. Each record was stamped with the exact date and time. No, Maya whispered. That's impossible. She rushed toward the control panel. Turn it off. But it was too late. The evidence had already been uploaded to independent legal servers and displayed live to the audience. The more she tried to stop it, the more proof appeared. One investor stood up. Are you saying you stole this technology? Another followed. Did you lie to every investor in this room? A journalist raised her microphone. Miss Maya, do you have any explanation? Camera flashes exploded across the hall. For the first time, Maya had no answer. I stepped onto the stage. The audience turned toward me. I didn't come here for revenge, I said quietly. I came for the truth. I connected version Omega to the display. Within seconds, the real invention activated flawlessly. No warnings, no errors, no failures. The audience erupted into applause. Professor Daniel smiled. I think everyone now knows who the real engineer is. Security officers approached Maya. She lowered her head as investigators collected the copied device and the signed contracts. The investors canceled their agreements. Reporters rushed to publish the breaking story. Everything she had built on lies collapsed in a single afternoon. I watched silently. In my first life, I lost everything because no one believed me. In this life, I never needed to convince anyone. The truth spoke louder than I ever could. 6 months later, spring arrived. The city looked exactly the same. But my life had changed completely. The court officially ruled that I was the sole creator of the technology. Every patent was returned to my name. Every false accusation against me was erased from my record. For the first time, my name meant something again. The company that had once rejected me invited me back. This time, not as an assistant, not as an employee, but as the chief technology officer. I politely smiled. I appreciate the offer, but I've already chosen a different path. A year later, I opened my own research company, Asterion Technologies. Professor Daniel became my first advisor. Young engineers from across the country joined my team. There were no lies, no stolen ideas, no fear of being forgotten. Only people who believed that innovation should belong to the person who created it. One rainy afternoon, I received an anonymous letter. Inside was a single sentence. I'm sorry. There was no name. No return address. I quietly folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Some apologies come too late. Some wounds never completely disappear. But forgiveness doesn't always require another chance. Sometimes, it simply means choosing to move forward. That evening, I stood on the rooftop of my new headquarters. The city lights stretched to the horizon. I remembered the girl who had died alone in a small apartment, believing no one would ever know the truth. She had lost everything, but she had given me one final gift, a second life. I whispered into the wind. Thank you for not giving up. The breeze carried my words into the night. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, my heart felt light. I wasn't living to prove someone wrong anymore. I was living for myself. As the sun rose over the skyline, I smiled. The future was finally mine. The end.